What is going on, guys? Well, we have reached the month of June, so we are about halfway through the year so far. And at this point in the year, I love making my halfway lists, and we're going to do 3 lists this year in separate videos. And the lists I'm going to be doing are my favorite films of the year so far, my least favorite films of the year so far, and the video that we're going to be discussing today is the movies that have disappointed me the most this year, the films that I was really excited for that let me down. These aren't all necessarily movies that I hated by any means. They're just movies that did not live up to the expectations that I had hoped that they would. And I'm excited to talk about these movies. They're not in any particular order whatsoever. I've just kind of mixed them all in. So let's get into it right now. So first up is going to be the film In a Violent Nature. This is a movie that a ton of people had been hyping up for quite some time, including myself. I was really excited to watch this movie. And if you watched my review, this is a POV slasher movie where we are supposed to be following the slasher from their perspective, killing these groups of kids that are in this area that he's in. And I found this movie to be incredibly lackluster and disappointing. I really enjoyed the concept, and I think when the movie stuck to its concept is when it was most successful. Problem I had with this movie, it didn't stick to its own concept. It was constantly shifting perspectives, putting us in the point of view of these kids when we're supposed to be sticking to the slasher. And in the third act, when we jumped into the perspective of the final girl per se, it just completely lost me at that point. The movie is beautifully shot and has some really awesome kill sequences. There are also some kill sequences that are nowhere near as unique and exciting as some of the other ones. And as I was watching this movie, I was just let down, and I was like, I get that the moments where he's just kind of trudging along are probably slow for some people, but I think if you would have stuck to that concept, that it would have been so much more of an interesting experience than flipping perspectives and getting into the cliche of every other slasher movie. And if you're really going to try to subvert audiences and do something different, I need more than what was accomplished here. I thought the third act was a miserable slog. I hated the way this movie ended, and honestly, I have no urge to revisit it. I know there's a lot of people that really liked it, but I don't see myself going back to this one anytime in the near future. Up next is the film Humane from director Caitlin Cronenberg. I'm a huge fan of David Cronenberg and Brandon Cronenberg, so I was really excited to watch this movie because it was Caitlin's debut, but this movie was not very good. I feel like the concept was really engaging and interesting, but I thought the performances were really bad. I thought the execution was really sloppy. I don't normally complain about production and like a lack of funding, but this movie felt really cheap. It felt like a made-for-TV kind of like sci-fi movie that because of the production budget was pulling me out of it. I thought that this concept was really interesting, but forcing us to be in one house the entire movie kind of took away from the effects that it was having on the entire planet, which I thought would have been a lot more interesting to explore. Being that this was one of those eat the rich movies, I didn't think it was saying anything much different than what all the other movies in this respective genre are trying to do. And I don't know, being that this was a Cronenberg, my expectations were pretty through the roof, and I was just let down in virtually every way, and I don't see myself ever revisiting this one again. Up next is the film La Chimera, which I know a ton of people absolutely adored, and I enjoyed a lot of this movie. I thought a lot of it was entertaining, it was beautifully shot, but it just left me feeling relatively empty by the end of the film. I think Josh O'Connor's performance was absolutely incredible. I think he was really dedicated to the role, and he had a lot of really exceptional moments, but there were so many moments in this movie that just kind of jumped to these characters living out their mundane lives that didn't really add to what I feel like the film was trying to say about the relationships to human beings and art, and like the relationship between human beings and like artifacts that people leave behind, and what it means when you kind of intrude on those things. And there's so many interesting concepts here, but I don't feel like any of them are explored enough here to really create a satisfying ending. When you have all of those concepts coming together, you think that it would make for something really thoughtful and that you'll be thinking about for a really long period of time. And I know there's a lot of people who really enjoyed this movie kind of basking in its simplicity, and there are a ton of movies that I love that do those things. Like Wim Wenders' Perfect Days is an incredible example of a film that I feel like perfectly encapsulates that type of an environment and that type of a feeling. But this movie just didn't do it for me. I felt like the pacing was really off. I felt like when it got into its fantastical realism moments, that they weren't really earned. And it's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of incredibly charming moments here. I think that the cast does a really excellent job. It's a movie that I probably will revisit sometime in the future, but right now I just didn't really appreciate it as much as a lot of other people did. Next is the Shudder original movie Late Night with the Devil, a film that seemed like a lot of people really loved, and there was a huge controversy surrounding the AI artwork used in this movie, and I agree there's no place for AI art in film. I do think that it's going to happen, unfortunately, and that it's the job of like SAG-AFTRA and people to really fight to make sure that it doesn't overwhelm the industry. But regardless, there were a lot of incredible creatives that worked on this movie, but I just found this to be the most run-of-the-mill, bland horror movie that I've seen in quite some time. The aesthetics don't even match the time period very well. I didn't really feel like it captured the authenticity of this late night television show from the 1970s. Like no one really shoots the way those films were shot anymore and on the same equipment or anything. So trying to translate that in a way that feels accurate just seems very difficult. And then they did this whole like, we're getting behind the scenes footage outside of just the regular talk show, but you got these cameras doing like shot reverse shot of people talking to each other in really intimate moments. And I'm like, you wouldn't have that many cameras in the 1970s following these people behind the scenes. It just made absolutely no sense whatsoever. The CGI in this movie was laughably bad. Like one of the shots towards the tail end of the movie, I was just like, what the hell are you doing? And so much of this movie just felt like the same repetitive cyclical dialogue over and over again. I didn't feel any real tension building or atmosphere or anxiety of like what's going to happen to these characters. I do think David Dastmalchian's performance was absolutely exceptional. He is such a talented actor. I feel like I've seen it done before, and I feel like I've seen it done much better. And that's unfortunate because there was a lot of buzz around this movie in festival circuits, and I don't see myself revisiting this one either. Up next is the film Stopmotion, a horror movie that I feel like a ton of people were praising during festival circuits. I heard a ton of things about this positively, and it's another movie similar to Late Night with the Devil, a movie that I feel like I've seen 100 times before that didn't really add anything new or exciting to the genre. I did love the moments where stop motion animation was used. I thought it was beautifully executed. It looked very horrifying and otherworldly, but everything surrounding our lead character, I just really didn't care about her all that much. I found most of the characters in this film not to have a whole lot of personality. A lot of it, even for its short runtime, felt kind of like a slog to get through, which is unfortunate because I think that the premise here is really great, and I think there's a lot to work with. The issue is just all in the execution, and it's a movie that honestly I watched it several months ago and I've already forgot most of it. It just didn't stick with me in any sort of memorable way. And I don't know, I love stop motion animation and I'm all for supporting stop motion animation, but there are a lot of movies out there that are much better than this one in the stop motion format. And then last on this list is Lisa Frankenstein, a movie that I actually enjoyed. I thought it was charming and fun, but with all of the talent involved in this film, I expected it to be much, much better. This movie gets off to a very slow start. It was really hard to kind of be invested. A lot of the humor doesn't really work early on, but I do love the chemistry between the two lead characters. And I think once it gets settled in, it becomes much more entertaining of a film. I really liked a lot of the stuff at the halfway point and the third act of the movie, but I 100% expected this film to be like a cult classic or a movie that I'm just like, oh man, I can't wait to revisit this film a ton in the future. But most of kind of the sloppy jokes in this movie and some of the outside performances outside of our lead characters were not nearly as compelling or great as the two lead performers in this movie. And I don't know, I just expected to really love and enjoy this movie a lot, and I just ended up liking it. And I probably will revisit this one at some point in the future, but I think it could have been much better than it actually was. So what are some films so far this year that have disappointed you? Let me know in the comments. These are just the films that I went into with pretty high expectations and ended up not loving them as much as I'd hoped to. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.